Hi, I'm Mr. Simons, and in this video we're going to look at the 2018 HSC exam, and we're going to focus on business studies, obviously. And what we will do is we're going to focus on the multiple choice section. So even though it says allow 35 minutes, that we are spending a maximum of 20 minutes on this section. By we, actually, I mean you, in the context of your exam. With question 1, so a couple of things here. Sarah works 40 hours a week. Her contract entitles her to sick leave, paid annual leave, and superannuation. So if I'm looking at paid annual leave, so casual is not going to work. So here I am between permanent, full-time, and permanent part-time. Key part here is this 40 hours number, which is full-time. So here I would be looking at C. An entrepreneur uses social media to sell makeup to her friends and acquaintances. So I'm looking at here, so it's sort of broad. It's not personal, but it kind of is. So we'll put a question mark about this personal element to it. Which marketing strategy is the entrepreneur using? So I don't know about differentiation here, but also not really a marketing strategy. Well, I guess with product, I don't know. I'm going to put a question mark there. Intensive channel choice, no, because that is very much about how you move the products around, the distribution element. Personal selling is a sort of one-to-one approach, and it's typically in person. It's not really typical social media, because social media is going to many people. So I think for this question, the best answer would be e-marketing here, which is a term that the syllabus uses, which I don't think we would use in day-to-day discussion. We might talk about online marketing or just social media marketing as well. So that would be for question 2. Question 3, our friend Phil goes overseas to a photographic equipment trade fair where he sees other businesses using more efficient methods of taking passport photos. When I see this C bit, that even before I look in terms of the categories, that to me very much sounds like scanning and learning, because we don't know that Phil is implementing them, but we do know that he is looking, he is exploring out there. And if you look at these other categories, process layout, economies of scale, inventory management, none of those are going to answer that question. Okay, so here we go. So our question here is, which of the following is an example of voluntary separation? When we're talking about this, we have to think about it, well, it is the employee's choice. If I look at dismissal, that is involuntary. If I look at promotion, that is not separation. So here we can say, okay, so that is involuntary, and this is not separation. That's a P, would you believe? So really here, I'm then thinking about reinstatement. Reinstatement is when someone is put back into their role. That's not about separation. That here, the employee is choosing to leave, and that would occur when they resign. So for 4, the answer would be D. Question 5, a landscaping business includes an image of a large purple coloured tree on its website and its vehicle. So even before I get into the answer categories, that this to me seems like an example of branding, because it's helping this business to set itself apart from the competition. So if I look here, that it's not really an example of sales promotion nor niche marketing, that here I'm seeing that keyword branding. That sounds good to me. Competitive positioning, I mean, I guess you could say that the purple tree indicates the kind of position that this business takes, but I don't think that that's the best answer. That's a little bit confusing for me. So here, this is an example of branding the product, and the product here being the landscaping offering. Question 6, I think, is worth paying attention to because it contains a very kind of, a clear format in terms of the answer. So a cake manufacturer buys more sugar as its production output increases. So when I see production output increasing and I see this discussion of inputs, I'm already starting to think about economies of scale. So even here, I could sort of be like, well, this sounds like economies of scale here, but let's just double check. This enables it to buy the sugar at a lower price per kilo. So here I'm saying this is the definition here because the business can reduce its per unit costs. So that's the definition here. And if we look at these other categories, it's not logistics because it's not about moving the inputs. It's not about the inventory and whether it's wasted or arrives in time. It's not about where it's bought from. It's very much about this issue here. Question 7. Question 7 I found a little bit tricky. So if we look at this here, in which of the following are both sources of funds? So if you look at this, so we put it down like that, not very even, but we want to make sure that both of these are correct. Are they appropriate for a business purchasing extra stock before a busy trading period? So a couple of things that I would think about in terms of this response is that this business needs money now ahead of the busy trading period, and then it can pay it back later. The other thing I would think about is that because it's purchasing extra stock before this busy trading period, that this also makes me think about how this is short-term, that the business needs some short-term sources of finance, and that could affect our thinking as well. So if we look at the categories here, is that if I look at this first one here, wherever I see debentures, that debentures are a long-term source of finance. So I can already get rid of A and C. So even if I was confused about the question, if I can kind of focus on what is the likely time period for this source of finance, time period for the source of funds, the source of finance, that can really help me eliminate other ones. If I look here, is that unsecured notes, put this in blue, if I think about unsecured notes, that is a long-term finance strategy. That is very much in looking at share purchases and acquisitions. And so I just don't think that is the most relevant here. What I like about D is that the bank overdraft part, that to me seems like what you would get. If you needed money right now just to cover yourself and then you would repay it, that a bank overdraft would be a good solution. And then also that you're taking money out of the business just to cover this period of time. So I think for this question, that D is probably our best answer, that the both options in D allow us to cover a temporary cash shortfall. Okay, question 8. The Fair Work Commission has finalised a dispute between a business and a union. Which strategy has been used to resolve this workplace dispute? So, not common law here, and it's definitely not negotiation if it's gone to the Fair Work Commission. I think it's a bit tricky here because there are elements of mediation that could take place at the Fair Work Commission. But for me, because it's sort of saying this finalised thing, that probably arbitration is what this question is going for. But I guess technically, because at the Fair Work Commission, you do have the option of mediation. And in some cases, once you go to mediation, that could finalise the dispute. Because maybe that you've got the mediator at the Fair Work Commission who's able to finally get an agreement between the parties. I think B is probably the best answer, but I think you could argue that A is a possibility. If you disagree, just put it in the comments. Always happy to hear other opinions about this too. So question 9 says, a soup manufacturer finds it difficult to cope with the increase in demand for soup in winter. So if you think about it, it's sort of saying that as the temperature drops, so let's say that this here is the temperature, and this is the quantity of soup, that as the temperature falls, the quantity of soup rises. And maybe it's not exactly that one-to-one relationship, but you get the point, is that as temperature falls, more people want soup. Which performance objective could assist this business to meet the demand? So it needs a bit more help in terms of the flexibility, in terms of being able to respond to the cold weather with an increase in production. So I think D would be the answer here. We're not looking at cost or customization because we're producing the same soup. Dependability, I don't think that's the quality issue here. It's very much about gearing up to produce more as demand changes. Okay, question 10. Which approach is being used when a business creates a focus group? So I would put here market research, and that this as part of marketing to evaluate a product. So this isn't really about production because it's not about making the product. It's really kind of trying to understand the product, thinking about it from a marketing perspective, market research perspective. Selling, I'm not sure that's right here. Standardization, it's not, because it would be looking at what makes this product stand out. I think here A is our best answer in terms of where it fits in, because the market research part in terms of marketing, if we look at the syllabus, that falls under process as part of the roles, influence, processes strategies under marketing. Question 11. An increasing number of employees are seeking a better work-life balance. So here this is starting me to think about social influences. As a result, many businesses are adopting job sharing. So job sharing, to me, also signals flexibility, because we are allowing employees to have different arrangements to suit their lives. So this is not communication systems. This is definitely flexible working conditions, and here it's to a social influence, but not an economic influence. So here, 11 would be B. Question 12 says, our friend Kevin is considering investing in a business. To help determine which business to invest in, he should consider comparative ratio analysis. So this comparative part, right, of evaluating. When we are talking about this, so it's not about cash flow being assessed, because it would be about more than just cash flow. It would be plus other items as well. Not just market share is determined, because maybe we're also looking at cash flow and market share. Similar businesses are evaluated, so that seems like a pretty good response here. Business sales growth, so that's again another thing that could be considered as part of everything. But the overall point of comparative ratio analysis is saying we can put all these similar businesses next to each other. So we can say A, B, C, and so on, and that maybe they're sort of all options that Kevin is thinking about. And then what he'll do is he'll say, okay, well, I will look at the ratios to decide which one to invest in. And maybe it's like, well, B is the best bet. And when I'm looking at the ratios, I'm thinking about things like cash flow, sales, market share, that kind of stuff. So here, answer would be C. Sani works for a large manufacturing business. She organizes the transport. So that here, when I see organizes the transport, that already starts me thinking about logistics, moving things of raw materials and finished products across Australia. So here that sounds like logistics. It's not really service design, because they're not selling a service, that the business is actually manufacturing, that she is organizing, moving the things around. Global sourcing, not really talking about suppliers here, not leading edge technology either. It's the movement or transport of things, of goods. And that's why would be A for this question. 14. Recently, a business has removed one of its products from sale because it may contain toxic ingredients that could pose a health risk. So if I'm talking about health risk and removing things from sale, that was saying that it would be illegal to sell this because it would pose a health risk here. So it's not economic conditions. Competitive fairness, don't think so. Product differentiation, no. Government legislation, right? That the business doesn't want to do anything that would actually be illegal. And this process of selling a good that is known to cause harm, okay, that's illegal. Question 15. Now, question 15, I'm still a bit confused about. So if you can help me out, just put that in the comments. What is the benefit? So here, that's the focus, not on a cost, but what is a good thing to an Australian clothing company of outsourcing its manufacturing overseas? So it can control the production costs. I don't know if it can control the production costs because that another company is doing the manufacturing. Maybe it could reduce the production costs, but I guess control is a bit weird here because when we talk about outsourcing, particularly in the context of the syllabus, that one of the things we focus on is that, yes, it can reduce cost, but it also involves giving up control. So I don't think A is the good answer here. C, it can decide which employees manufacture its products. I can't do that because, again, I'm giving up control. It can consider the foreign manufacturer's workers as its own employees. Incorrect, because they work for the foreign manufacturer. Now, so we're only left with B as a likely answer. So I would put B down. But it says here it can lower human resource compliance costs. So I guess here we're saying that if we outsource, right, then we will reduce the number of employees and departments within the firm, which will then reduce HR costs. That perhaps that's the logic that this question is going for here. If you've got any special insights, please share them. That I guess the approach here is it's saying it's not its employees anymore, and it's being the manufacturing section. Which of the following lists 3 examples of transformed? So transformed here, so these resources have been changed. They're not the ones doing the changing. So if we think about it, that if I look here, technology, that does the changing, so cross it off, plus facilities. Here, human resources, that does the changing, so cross it off. Facilities, human resources, technologies, they do all the changing. Customers get changed, information gets changed, materials get changed. A would be the best one here. So 17, also a little bit tricky, I think. So staff members at Val's Vegan Restaurant wear uniforms with a large letter V on them. Okay, so they have that. They're expected to greet customers with a smile and clean up any spills immediately. Which element of the marketing strategy are these requirements an example of? So they're not packaging, right? Because, well, they're not really selling a product here. They're selling the service. They're running this restaurant. Promotion mix. I guess that there are elements of things, but it doesn't seem like that it doesn't relate to ads in this thing. So I don't think promotion is the best here. Positioning. Well, it's kind of like it is talking about how it will position the business, sort of friendly and clean and all those things. And there's also physical evidence here. And physical evidence is all about giving tangible experiences. So experiences that people can hold, in inverted commas, when they are buying services or products that are a bit more intangible. I guess you wouldn't really have an intangible product. You can't hold it. So all of these things here are giving a sort of level of experience. They are giving the customer and experience in terms of their engagement with the brand. So I think here that the best answer would be D, because it's not, I guess these things aren't really positioning it as something that is different from another business aside from the letter V. But I think all of these things are going to create a positive experience. Question 18. Australian businesses export to Canada. So what we're saying is that Australian businesses, they sell goods and services to Canada. Okay, so we've established that. What would happen if the value of the Aussie dollar increased compared to the Canadian dollar? So I'll put it up over here. We'll do it in white. So let's say in this example that the value of the Australian dollar will rise. And what we're saying is that the value of the Canadian dollar is going to get weaker. So the Australian dollar gets stronger and the Canadian dollar in this example will get weaker. Okay, so even before we get into the answer categories, what we can say then is we can say that Australia's goods are more expensive for Canadian businesses. And this is because that Canadians will have to use more of their money to buy one Australian dollar. So what we're saying is that Australia's goods become more expensive for Canadian businesses because the Australian currency is worth more. Likewise, Canadian goods are now cheaper for Australian businesses. So this is the kind of thing we're looking at. So if we go through the categories, there would be no effect. No, that's true. There would be some effect. Sorry, that is not true. There would be some effect. Australian imports from Canada, so things that Australia is buying from Canada would become more expensive. And we've said here, no, Canadian goods become cheaper for Australian businesses. So we would say, no, that's not correct because that would be cheaper. So B is wrong. Canadian businesses would find Australian products more affordable, or Australian products would become more expensive for Canadian businesses. So we can't have both of these. It has to be one or the other. And what we've said here is that Australian goods will become more expensive for Canadian businesses. So the answer here would be D. So let's just provide a little bit of extra explanation in case this is particularly confusing. So let's say that we've got Aussie dollars and we've got the Canadian dollars here. So let's say that at the start, the relationship is 1-to-1. So for every one Australian dollar, we can buy one Canadian dollar. Okay, so that's what happens at the start before everything changes. So then when the value of the Australian dollar increases, let's just call that part B. So the start is part A. Maybe that's confusing because of all these things. Let's call this little arrow 2 and let's call this little 1. So then we go 2 here. So let's say that now is that 1 Australian dollar now buys 2 Canadian dollars. So that the Australian dollar A, is much stronger. Before they were equal, now 1 Australian dollar gets you twice as much Canadian. And then if we flip the situation and we start it with the Canadian, so we would say, okay, so then what does 1 Canadian dollar now get you? So here I've divided by 2, so I'll divide that by 2. So then here, 1 Canadian dollar gets you only 50 cents Australian. So the Canadian dollar in this situation is much weaker. So any product in Australia is now going to become much more expensive because 1 Canadian dollar gets you 50 cents Australian, whereas before 1 Canadian dollar got you 1 Australian dollar. Okay, last 2 questions here. So we get to some more of the finance. We've got figures. What is the gross profit ratio for the business? So here, and they very helpfully have given us what the ratio is. So we'll say gross profit ratio equals gross profit over sales. Now we don't know gross profit, so we can go gross profit equals sales minus cost of goods sold, which then here would equal 600k minus 200k, which equals 400k. And then we can go back to here and say, okay, well then this equals 400k divided by sales, which is 600k, which is 2/3 or 66.7%. So here 67%. Let's look at the last question here. So it says, what is the average number of days that the business takes to collect its debts? So this part here is the accounts receivable turnover ratio. So then I will go accounts receivable turnover ratio equals sales over AR. And so here will equal 600,000 over 41,000, which then equals 14.63. Fine, but we can see here that we got to get it in days. So then in order to convert this accounts receivable turnover in days, we just go 365 divided by the accounts receivable turnover ratio. So here 365 over 14.63 equals approximately 25 days. That's just approximately equal to. So here it would be B. And that would be the response. Okay, so this was the 2018 multiple choice section. Any questions, just put them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.